Hello and welcome to my channel. If you are thinking of buying a smart TV this year or next year, but you are lost among so many reference brands and models that exist on the market right now: NanoCell, QLED, Triluminos, ULED, Mini LED, OLED. Well, in this video I will show you the definitive best guide so you can make the best decision. And I understand very well what you may be going through. Because before I started in this world, I thought that all televisions were the same, that they had the same technologies, and that they simply differed between the brands due to their prices. For example, I thought that the most recognized brands with more experience were more expensive simply and only because they were brands that had a greater experience or a larger audience, and that the cheaper brands were simply cheap because they were new or because people did not trust them much. But there really are many technologies in televisions today, and that is why they are also classified into low-end, mid-range, and high-end. To begin with, the most important thing you should keep in mind is that currently there are three main technologies: LCD LED televisions, OLED televisions, and micro LED televisions. Micro LEDs are incredibly expensive. It is a relatively new technology, so I will not include them in this video, but if you can buy them, go ahead, that would be the best. But it is incredibly expensive. They can be worth almost what a house can cost. Returning then to televisions with more affordable technologies at an economic level, we have LED LCDs, and I want you to understand that there are currently some sellers who are still telling people that LCD TVs are different from LED TVs. And I understand this confusion because there used to be LCD televisions with a different type of backlight that was not LED. And currently there are still LCD televisions but with a different backlight that would be LED. Therefore, if on the box of the television you are going to buy, you find the word LED, QLED, Mini LED, keep in mind that television has an LCD screen that is liquid crystal, and what could vary would be the type of LED backlighting technology, either edge LED, direct full array LED, or direct full array LED with mini LEDs. So I will first explain to you everything that has to do with LCD LED televisions. First, I start with color technologies. When you find, for example, the term QLED, the Q refers to quantum dots. Quantum dots, such as this model, refers to a color technology. The same applies to NanoCell, the same applies to QNED, where the Q and N refer to quantum dots and NanoCell respectively, which would be combined color technologies that are supposed to improve the saturation and accuracy of colors. There is also the Triluminos technology by Sony, which is based as such on quantum dots, simply because Sony decided to give it a name that was a little prettier or more striking. We also have, for example, crystal technology, which is also a color technology, in this case, typical of the Samsung brand. For example, these two models have that type of color technology, and the main objective is supposed to improve color accuracy. And what about the term Neo QLED? As such, it is a term that the Samsung brand adopted. It is simply like giving a plus to the quantum dots color technology. There have been Samsung Neo QLED televisions, various models for several years, and many of them also have mini LED backlight technology. I am now going to explain to you the types of LED backlight technologies that exist. All LCD TVs these days have some type of LED backlight technology. The most basic technologies would be LED edge, which would indicate that the LED lights would be located only in the lower part of the screen. Some have LED light also in the upper part of the screen in addition to the lower part, and others have LED lights in the side parts in addition to the upper and lower parts of the screen. There's also the basic direct LED backlight technology, so to speak, which would simply indicate that the little LED lights would be located occupying, of course, the back of the screen. Sometimes they have rows of 3, 4 or more. And there would also be the full array direct LED backlighting technology, which is simply a greater number of LED lights, including the very useful function known as local dimming. Before explaining to you what the technology known as local dimming is about, I want to tell you that the other type of LED backlighting technology that currently exists that, in a very affordable at an economic level, is known as full array direct LED with mini LEDs, or simply known as mini LED technology. Both the basic full array and the full array with mini LEDs have the local dimming function. Some TVs with edge LED technology also have local dimming, but the local dimming on those models is terrible. So look for TVs that have full array or have mini LEDs if your budget allows. What then does the technology known as local dimming do? Well, I already explained to you that the LED lights would be located across the entire screen, obviously on the back. What it does is simply that the local dimming will dim or darken those lights in the areas where they should be dark, to try to show black colors pulling more towards perfection. For example, the LED light in these areas would be off. It is done intelligently through software. And the little LED light, for example around the moon, would be on. So what the television is going to do is turn those little LED lights on and off. Well, not exactly turning them off, because they don't turn off completely, they just dim a lot. So what the television is going to do is to dim or darken those LED light intelligently, and obviously in real time where they should be dark. And it will turn or increase the LED light's intensity where a tone of color or a greater amount of brightness appear, for example the moon, or if a scene with color shows up. If for example a cloud appears here, then those LED lights will simply be backlit, but the rest of the light bulbs where it should be dark will simply be very dimmed. But something very important is missing in LCD LED televisions, and that is the pixel configuration they may have. I already mentioned the color technologies, nanocell, quantum, dots, triluminos, which as such are added to the LCD screen that fulfill the function of improving the colors in terms of saturation and, for example, in terms of accuracy. But you must also take into account the pixel configuration they have, or what is known as VA panel, IPS panel or ADS panel, which are currently the most common in LED LCD televisions. I don't know if you've noticed it already, but from where you are watching these televisions, you can notice that the colors look somewhat washed out or slightly whitish. And that is because all these 4 LCD televisions have a VA panel, which indicates that the pixel alignment is vertical, and the main disadvantage of this type of television is precisely this, that the viewing angles are not good, let's say. They are terrible in some way. They are not the best options for watching a soccer game or for playing video games with your parents, friends, or relatives who sit around the screens of those televisions that have a VA panels. So in that case, if for example you need an LCD LED TV to have better viewing angles, you should go for one that has an IPS panel, or at least one that has an ADS panel. Keep in mind that despite what many sellers and YouTube channels say about ADS and IPS are the same, they definitely are not. Let's say ADS is an intermediate point, IPS is the one with the best viewing angles, VA would be the one with the worst viewing angles. But in addition to that, you must keep in mind that the main advantage of televisions with a VA panel is that they can generate a greater amount of brightness and better performance in dark scenes. That is, you can perceive black colors that are a little more elusive to that perfection that a person seeks, and less intensity of the effects that one knows as clouding and blooming. While televisions with IPS panels, regardless of what type of LED backlight technology they may have, are the worst when it comes to clouding and blooming effects. While a TV with an ADS panel, let's say it is the intermediate point in terms of dark scenes. Well, I just mentioned the terms clouding and blooming, and in case you don't understand them, or if you didn't know them, it is simply clouding, the effect of cloudiness, and blooming would be the effect of light flowering, so to speak. What happens then when there is a cloudy effect? What happens is that the black colors are going to look grayish, slightly grayish, or very grayish, as for example happens in televisions that usually have an IPS panel, and in some that have an ADS panel, even if they had some type of backlighting technology, let's say sophisticated like a full array with local dimming, or better yet, one with mini LEDs that of course would have local dimming too. This television, for example, has a VA panel with mini LED backlighting technology with local dimming. It is TLCC755, which is a 2024 model. So what I'm going to show you is simply as an example. The clouding effect would be this. As you can see, the black colors turned grayish. And as I told you, the worst televisions with this effect would be those with an IPS panels followed by those with an ADS panels. The blooming effect is simply generated when there is local dimming function enabled. The most concrete example would be this one that I show you, although the blooming effect is almost not perceived as such in this model, but I am going to point it out to you. The blooming effect is simply that effect that can be generated around the shapes that are most illuminated. For example, in this case, a very slight blooming effect can be perceived around the shape of each of these moons. And in IPS and ADS panel televisions, the blooming effect is usually even much more pronounced. So, if you are going to look for a mini LED television, it is because you want better performance in dark scenes. So look for one that has a VA panel. The good thing is that currently most brands include a VA panel in their mini LED LCD televisions because they know that people prefer the best performance in dark scenes that those types of VA panel televisions have. Well, there is actually another example known as backlight bleeding or backlight glare, which is usually more visible, of course, also on those televisions with an IPS or ADS panel, which are normally what you can see. Backlight bleeding or annoying light glare that can be seen on some occasions, especially when there are many dark parts in the scene. There are no light glares or backlight bleeding in this television because it has mini LED technology with very good local dimming function, from my point of view. Before continuing, I want to tell you that you can support my channel either through VAKI, through Patreon, or for example by purchasing through Amazon in the links that I leave in the description. With every purchase you support my channel, because I get a small commission that would obviously help me a lot. And also hit the like button if you are enjoying this video, and subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. Also, of course, all that would help me a lot. To finish, what has to do with LCD LED televisions, the types of color and backlight technologies, you will easily know them either by looking at the box of each model, or by going to the brand websites of each model you want, or by watching videos on my YouTube channel or other reliable YouTube channels. The difficult or sometimes impossible thing is to know for sure what type of panel the LCD LED TV you want has. You know, VA, IPS, or ADS panel. Well, I say that it is almost impossible because in the vast majority of cases it is not in the box. In fact, I have never seen that the boxes of the televisions put if the TV has IPS, ADS, or IPS panel. They don't list it on the websites of each brand of each model. So you then have two options: watch those types of videos from my channel or from other YouTube channels. Or if the model you are planning to buy is displayed in a store, then simply go to that store, tell the sellers to provide you with content that has color, and then you will have to slightly tap the screen and it should generate this type of flashes, which are very visible flashes. I say this because some people go to stores, tap the screen of an LCD television and feel that it generates a very slight flash, and with that, they think that the television has a VA panel, but no. The flashes, as I show you, have to be very visible, and with that you corroborate that the television has a VA panel. Those taps are not going to damage the television because it is not an incredibly strong tap you are going to apply. And despite what some sellers tell you that this method is not accurate, they are completely wrong because it is accurate. If it generates this type of very visible flashes, then the LED LCD television you want will have a VA panel. And in order to know if the TV has an IPS or ADS panel is a little more difficult. You would have to tell the seller to put on the TV a white screen. You, for example, can search on YouTube for a white background video, then a white background appears. Then you have to use your cell phone that needs to have a good zoom. then you place it very close to the screen and wait for the pixels capture. But it is a process, let's say, a little cumbersome or annoying to apply. Hence, at least with the taps on the screen, you affirm or rule out whether or not that television you want has a VA panel. Now I'm going to talk to you about those televisions with OLED technology. The first thing you need to understand is that OLED is not QLED's competition. And I mention this because many people believe that simply because the Q and O change, they think that, for example, when seeing a Samsung television with the term QLED, they think that when seeing an LG television with the term OLED, they are simply technologies that compete because they think they are the same with different names and that they are simply specific to each brand. But no, I remind you that QLED, in this case the Q refers to quantum dots, which will be color technology, and LED refers to the fact that the LCD television has some type of LED backlight technology. But in the case of OLED, everything changes. LED lights, so to speak, are organic, they emit their own light, they are not liquid crystal as such, they are organic light emitting diodes. The great advantage of televisions with OLED technology, well, in fact there are several advantages, but the main one is that they have perfect performance in dark scenes. There will be no clouding, no blooming, no backlight bleeding. The level of detail is very good, it is better. In some OLED models more than others, but in general it is very good. They will have infinite contrast ratio. Another great advantage would be its viewing angles. For example, in this Samsung OLED S90D, the viewing angles are perfect. Well, actually this model is called QD OLED, or the technology is like this, QD OLED. The Q and D simply refer to quantum dots, which would be the color technology included in this OLED model. It has perfect viewing angles, but it is also true that there are OLED televisions that do not have perfect viewing angles, but they are almost perfect. For example, this Sony A80L, which is currently my personal television, in case you were wondering. It is not my personal television because it is the best in the market currently in terms of OLED technology. Yes, I am a fan of OLED televisions, but I have it as a personal television simply because it is the most expensive television I have purchased so far, and reselling it would simply be losing a lot of money, which is why I decided to leave it as my personal television. But returning to OLED technology as such, I already told you that it is the best you can currently purchase that can exist with a very affordable level in terms of economy. And of course, performance advantages in dark scenes, perfect or almost perfect viewing angles. And their only disadvantage is that they can suffer from what is known as image retention or pixel burning. For example, if you left the same image static for some reason. If you deactivate all the care that the software has on your television with OLED technology, it is simply very likely that at some point your television may suffer from the aforementioned image retention, which is simply that, for example, with the passage of time when watching other content. For example, it is very likely that the shadow of this boat or the shadow of this cloud will be seen, which would be somewhat more noticeable when, for example, you place a screen of a single color, and that can lead to what is known as burning or death of pixels, and as such it will not be recovered and will always remain that way. However, it really is something very, very rare, very difficult for it to happen. It can happen under very extreme conditions that, for example, you play and keep the same logo on the screen for 8 or 10 hours a day in a row, every day, for several weeks, months, or years, then it could happen. But with normal use, let's say, it is almost impossible for this to happen. But it is true, for example, that Samsung's QD OLED televisions have shown to have greater resistance to those aspects of image retention and pixel burn-in, at least according to the artings.com website. Furthermore, if for some reason you decided to leave a static screen, or rather if you forgot, if you paused a YouTube video, went to the kitchen, went out to the store, then what televisions with OLED technology do is that through software, after several seconds, they activate these screensavers precisely to avoid image retention. Here, for example, this screensaver was activated. Sony also has it, the OLED models of the LG brand, and I would say that all OLED models of all brands have this type of protection, precisely to avoid image retention and pixels burn-in. Therefore, I tell you that those effects could happen especially with gamers who are very demanding, or who, as I said, play many hours a day of the same video game, and the same logo will always be on the screen for many hours, for months or years. Then your television with OLED technology could suffer from image retention and pixel burning. Now I'm going to talk to you about something that is also usually very important, and that is, of course, the image processor of each model, the brightness amounts, and the high dynamic range technologies, which they are compatible with. First, I'll start by telling you that many people are disappointed when buying a 4K television because they think that the content they watch through, for example, digital signal encoders which offer 720p or 1080i signals are not shown in 4K, and that's why they get disappointed or go and complain to the sellers. In fact, sellers are often to blame because they promise buyers that a 4K television will show all types of content in 4K, but that is not the case. It is true that some televisions do a better job in terms of image upscaling. Usually high-end television such as this QD OLED from Samsung, or for example Sony televisions in general, even in the low range, do a very good job. For example, the Sony that I just showed you, that is in my room, which is my personal television in terms of image upscaling. It does a very good job. Obviously, it is much better compared to a television that is lower range, such as this LG, which is low range, which is more affordable on an economic price, which very likely will probably be enough for some people. Although in terms of brightness, low-end televisions that are very economical are not usually the best. They tend to have a very low amount of brightness, which is why they are more recommended for a room that has little lighting, because that is where what has to do with the management of reflections comes into play. Obviously, managing reflections has to do with the amount of brightness your television has, mainly, regardless of the type of technology and LED LCD panel, or if it is an OLED television. Yes, it is true that OLED televisions tend to handle reflections from light sources on the screen better. But for example, the reflections on screen of what you have in the room depends a lot on the amount of brightness your TV has. For example, this QD OLED from Samsung is an OLED television with a very high amount of brightness, but the Sony television that I just showed you, that is in my room, does not have a high amount of brightness. Although it is still a very high amount of brightness compared to, for example, a low-end television model or some mid-range ones, but not as high as higher-end televisions, mini LED or OLED. But I, who am, let's say I am not a fan when it comes to a high amount of brightness, for me that Sony television is perfect. In fact, sometimes I have to lower the amount of brightness on it. The other thing I want you to take into account is the high dynamic range technologies that each of these televisions can support. The most common would obviously be HDR10, HLG, HDR10 Plus, and Dolby Vision. On Samsung's part, to date, you will never find a television that has support for Dolby Vision. Even so, it is not really a big problem. I have already been able to experience it, and there is not much difference in watching content with Dolby Vision and one with HDR10, although it can also vary depending on each model. I can simply tell you that with Dolby Vision, what I notice is that when handling dynamic metadata, the amounts of brightness in each scene can vary automatically, and that may actually bother some people. Let's say Samsung does not opt for that technology, probably because you have to pay because it is not a free-to-use technology. Like for example HDR10, HLG, or the direct competition of Dolby Vision, which would be HDR10 Plus. HDR10 Plus does have dynamic metadata. So if you want a television that has a high amount of brightness, either because you like to abuse your eyesight or simply because you need it to have better reflection handling, because it is going to be close to a window or because it is going to be in a room that is incredibly bright, you already know that a low-end television that is usually very economical is not going to work for you. I say economical, more or less around $500 or 500 euros for a 55-inch model or a little more. In that case, you would have to go at least to the mid-range TVs that have a type of QLED color technology that would be quantum dots, which usually generate a little more brightness. Or if you have a higher budget, then 4:4 to the upper mid-range such a mini LED TV, which of course would be even much better in terms of brightness. And as I told you, the fact that the TV has Dolby Vision technology or not, from my point of view, is not really something that important. Although many people are going to call me ignorant or that I do not know about this, well, that is really. What I can tell you in terms of the experience that I have been able to perceive in all the models that I have been able to review and compare. But obviously it's your decision if you want something with Dolby Vision or if you don't care that it doesn't have support for that kind of high dynamic range technology. I am now going to talk to you about something very important that many people do not take into account, and that is the operating system of the smart TV that they want to buy. Currently, there are 4 very main ones. Well, in fact, let's say there are 6. There is the HISENSE from Samsung. There is, of course, Google TV that is managed by brands such as Sony, TCL, HISENSE, among others. There is the WebOS that is typical of the LG brand. There is the VIDA operating system that is mainly available in some models of the HISENSE brand. There is the Fire OS operating system. There is also Roku TV. There are also other operating systems that are typical of other little-known brands. But as such, I want to tell you that it is very important in terms of what it has to do with apps. Let's talk about the most common ones, which would be Samsung's Tizen, LG's WebOS, Google TV, and the VIDA operating system. And of course, well, let's say the Fire OS and the Roku TV. The operating system with the greatest variety of applications would of course be Google TV. Let's say Fire OS too, because it is also based on Android. I say this because many people, when they buy a Samsung television or one from the LG brand, are disappointed because they thought that the operating system was going to be Google TV, because they thought that they could install unofficial applications with compromised legality. Then they get very disappointed. So I want to clarify that aspect, which is very important. But keep in mind that it's not that Samsung's Tizen and LG's WebOS or HISENSE's VIDA are bad operating systems, because in fact they seem to me to be very good operating systems in terms of design, functionalities, and a really very intuitive menu location. The problem is simply that in terms of unofficial applications or those with compromised legality, they are not the best. In fact, you cannot install that type of applications. Therefore, in that case, the operating system better for you would be Android TV or Google TV or at least Fire TV. So, being objective, as operating system, I must tell you that Google TV is as such the most balanced, or at least one of the most balanced. And what each brand does in each of its models is add a kind of layer of customization in each of its menus. For example, regarding Sony televisions, I really like this menu for shortcuts because it is really very fast. I can change the image mode very quickly. The amount of brightness, I can turn off the screen so that only the audio can be heard, which is a function that I use a lot, and I can do it very quickly. In fact, let's say that it is one of the functions that also made me keep this model as my personal television, because I like everything to be fast, to access all the commands fast. But the TCL and HISENSE models in terms of menus are not bad at all, and they also have shortcuts for different functions. So as I say, if you are looking for a greater balance, Google TV will be your answer in terms of operating system. If you bought a Samsung or LG television, the solution would be to buy a TV box with Google TV or a Chromecast or another device with the operating system that you like the most. Another very important aspect is of course the resolution of the television you want to buy. Currently there are HD, Full HD, 4K and 8K televisions. I would tell you to avoid 8K, they are very expensive, and currently there is not much content in 8K, so you would paying for something that, at least currently, you would not take full advantage of. Who knows if in the future you will get a lot of 8K content. Presumably so, but I don't know how many years it will take for example, streaming apps to release a lot of content in 8K, so you can take advantage of your 8K television. Therefore, I would tell you not to take them into account so much. And as for HD and Full HD televisions, they can only be obtained up to sizes of 43 inches. and they would only be recommended if the main objective is to watch content through digital signal decoders and occasionally some content through a streaming application. Because if, for example, the main objective is to watch content through a streaming application that currently offers a lot of content in 4K and sometimes with high dynamic range, then obviously in that case it would be better for you to buy a television with 4K resolution. And currently some models can be obtained from the size of 43 inches and some brands from the size of 50 inches. Now let's talk about the size and the location you are going to be in relation to the screen. I'm telling you this with my experience. Although there are recommendations from experts who would tell you that more or less at a distance between 1.5 meters and 2 meters, the most recommended size would be 50 or 55 inches. I can tell you that I have had, for example, a 65-inch television here. The distance from the screen to my eyes is more or less approximately 230 meters, and I found that the 65-inch size is more than fine. But for the gaming area, sometimes such a large size is not the best option for that type of distance, because you have to be moving your eyes a lot. Although it may not seem like that, it can be felt. And if, for example, you are like me, one of those people who gets dizzy relatively easily playing, for example, first or third person shooter video games, then such a large television at such a short distance would not be the best option either. You should also keep in mind that if the content you are mainly going to view has very low resolution, for example through digital signal encoders, then a small size TV, let's say 50 inches or less, is better for you. This Sony is 55 inches, I repeat. The distance I am from it is approximately 230 meters. And for me, it is the most balanced size for all types of content, including the gaming area, but it is because in my case I got dizzy very easily with a television that is larger, at least at this distance. But most likely to you, this dizziness won't happen. So in that case, if the distance is more or less 2 meters to 2.5 meters, and you have the money for a 65-inch size TV, or because you want a large size TV, or even a 75-inch model that I also have had here in my room, I would tell you that it could be an option that you could consider if you don't get dizzy easily in the gaming area. And if the content that you are going to see, the vast majority of the time is in 4K or at least in 1440p with or without high dynamic range. As an additional recommendation, I would tell you that if the bed in your room is very high and you plan to place it on a table, make sure that the difference in height between the mattress and the top of the table where you would place the television is between 60 centimeters and 70 centimeters. I say this because if, for example, you adopt this position, your knee would cover the screen if the table was very low, or in fact, sometimes your feet could also obstruct your field of vision. Or simply place the TV on a high wall stand. Now, I am going to explain to you something that has to do with the gaming section and especially with the HDMI 2.1 technology that started to be on the market several years ago, and that, well, in fact, currently, many people are looking for televisions with HDMI 2.1. And currently, the vast majority of televisions, even low-end, have HDMI 2.1 technology, but not all have support for 120 Hz in 4K or variable refresh rate technologies. I say that because currently, brands can say that their televisions have HDMI 2.1 technology as they are compatible with ERC, which means Enhanced Audio Return Channel technology, in addition, of course, to 60 Hz in 4K with high dynamic range. To know that you must, in the vast majority of cases, watch videos from my channel or other reliable channels, because some sellers do not know or some brands lie. They lie intentionally or not so intentionally, and they confuse people. And they make them believe that their televisions do have support for 120 Hz in 4K. But even if we were talking about low-end television that does not have 120 Hz support, nor variable refresh rate technologies, even so the vast majority of models, well, in fact all the models analyzed so far with 4K resolution and some also full HD in the gaming area perform very well in terms of low input lag times and little ghosting effect, especially even when they have a VA panel. As such, then I would say that in the gaming area, don't worry so much if your budget is low. That is, if your budget is relatively low or very low, you cannot demand much from a full HD or 4K television. As long as your television has good input lag times, with that I think you will be well served and happy. Obviously, if you have a bigger budget, then aim for something that has support for 120 Hz in 4K with variable refresh rates technologies. Or, as is the case with this Samsung QD OLED or this HISENSE U7N or this TCL C755, which has support for 144 Hz in 4K in case, for example, you have a PC graphics card that is very powerful and that you can take advantage of that high refresh rates as such. But if you have a console like the PlayStation 5, PlayStation 5 Pro, or the Xbox Series X, I would tell you that with 60 Hz in 4K, if you have a tight budget, it would also be enough. Some models also offer, such as this case the Samsung, offer a game bar with predetermined image modes for an automatic or faster change of colors and graphic quality. Also, some models from the TCL, HISENSE and Sony brands offer the game bar option, which can be very useful for the vast majority of people. Now let's talk about the durability of televisions. Look, the truth is I don't know how long a television can last. LCD TVs are supposed to have a lifespan of between 60,000 and 80,000 hours. According to some sources, others say it is shorter than 60,000 and 80,000 hours. It's really something ideal, something very fantastic that will never happen. I give you as an example the Samsung Q70R, which is from 2019. It has more or less daily use of between 3 and 4, sometimes up to 5 hours. It has been running since the end of 2019 and until now it works very well. It does not have any dead pixels, any strange lines, no loss of brightness, nor any bad function in terms of local dimming because this model is LCD with full array as LED backlight technology. Therefore, as a recommendation, I would simply tell you that you always connect your television to a good voltage regulator. Of course, all of my televisions and my family's televisions are always connected to good voltage regulators such as this one from the Forza brand or this other one that is dedicated only to the television itself, which was recommended to me by a Samsung brand technician. And so far, the televisions have not suffered any problems. What happens is that in smart TVs, the main weak point is the electronic system. When they begin to suffer failures due to power ups and downs, whether you live in Latin America, in Europe, in Africa, in Asia, wherever the place you live, it is likely that this could result in a problem. So always connect it to a good voltage regulator. If suddenly there is an electrical storm, not even a voltage regulator that has a ground pole will save you. So in those extreme cases, I would recommend turning off the television with the button on the remote control and disconnecting it from the electrical power and plug it back in when the weather normalizes. Although it is true that according to rthings.com, crystal televisions from the Samsung brand and some from the LG brand, also with Edge LED, that have more or less thin or ultra thin designs, tend to have less resistance over time under extreme conditions. So if you decide to buy this type of television, what is recommended in addition to the voltage regulator would be to lower the brightness level at least a little, so that way your screen TVs suffer less over time. To finish, let's talk about the speaker systems that televisions currently have, which really are not the best except for some exceptions in the upper mid-range or high-end section, such as the TCL C755, the TCL C855, the HISENSE models, the U7N, U8N, which have, let's say, powerful speakers as well as an included subwoofer that improves the bass and the surround experience in general. Some Samsung brand models, some LG brand models, and of course some Sony brand models that are upper mid-range and high-end. But as such, in the vast majority of cases when it comes to a cheap television, do not expect a clear or very powerful result in terms of speakers. They will most likely be enough for a small room, for a medium-sized room if you are not demanding, and as such, you are not interested in rumbling your home as soon as bass or the neighbors notice the movie you are watching. But if you are interested in that, or if you simply want to experience something that is very similar to what you would experience in a cinema or theater, in that case it is best for you to buy a sound bar with subwoofer, even if it is one of the cheapest. To finish, and as a summary, I would tell you first, not to be fooled by the sellers. Watch this video as many times as necessary. When I can, I will answer some comments. I will try to make live videos answering questions and doubts to those who connect. But be very well informed. Don't make the mistake of buying any television from any brand just because you found it in a very good offer, because sometimes you can be disappointed, perhaps not in terms of graphic quality, but perhaps, for example, in terms of the operating system, or for example, in terms of the speaker system, or for example, in terms of warranty service, which for some brands can be worse compared to others. That can vary depending on each country. I can only tell you that here in my country, Colombia, I have experienced very good service from LG and Samsung. I can't talk to you about other brands as such, but as for other brands in other countries, I really don't know about how the warranty service is like. And also, of course, take into account all the technologies, what you need your TV for as such, or let's say your needs, what you would use your television for, more or less the distance. If it is for a room, for a living room, if it is focused more towards the gaming area, or more of all towards digital signal decoder content, or more or less balanced content, also consider the resolution. Well, all those aspects that I have mentioned in this video. Without further to add, if you like this video, I would appreciate it if you click the like button, subscribe to my channel if you have not already, enable the notification bell so you know instantly every time I upload a new video. Support my channel if you can through Patreon, VAKI, or by purchasing through the Amazon or referral links that I leave you in the description. Being no more, I say goodbye. Thanks for watching, and until next time.